Hi there, welcome to another week of sociology class. We are still going to be talking about social stratification this week, but now we are going to branch into ascribed statuses and how ascribed statuses are also positions in society that can affect your hierarchy, your position within the power structure of a society, okay? So in previous weeks, when we looked at social stratification, we really focused heavily on achieved status. In particular, in the United States, we look at income, occupation, and education as the three most important achieved statuses to determine socioeconomic level. And your socioeconomic level is how we organize that ladder, that 7-rung ladder that we looked at in the United States. And also, your socioeconomic status essentially is the way we organize global stratification into that 4-rung ladder where we look at high-income nations, upper middle, lower middle, and low-income nations, because we look at the style of life and the average standard of living, the human development issues that are at play in the lower income nations compared to the higher income nations. So all of that you covered in Project 3, and if you haven't done it yet, go ahead and do it. Maybe stop this video now and go watch the other videos you need in order to ace Project 3. But this week, we're going to continue to talk about social stratification, and like I said, branch into the ascribed status aspect of social stratification. In particular, for chapters 9 and 10, we're going to look at 4 ascribed statuses. We're going to look at race, ethnicity, sex, and gender. Because when you overlap these ascribed statuses onto the concept of life chances that we focused on so heavily in previous weeks, you will see definite patterns of life changes in, a fluctuation in the amount of life chances that some people have when you look at their relationship to the power structure in society and dominant versus subordinate groups. So we are also going to be talking about dominance in society compared to subordination in society. And I want to put some emphasis on those 2 words really quick. I don't have them written on the board, but put them in your notes. Dominant groups versus subordinate groups. Because your ascribed status has a lot to do not only with life chances, like I just said, but it has to do with your relationship to power in a society. And this sounds like I'm focusing a lot on conflict theory. No, functionalists say that social stratification is necessary in a society because different kinds of work has different kind of social value. And if there weren't unequal categories of people in a society, then the work that was undesirable that people didn't want to do wouldn't necessarily get done. And some of that is essentially vital for society's stability and order. And so there's also some really vital work that you have to be super smart and super educated in a long time of education and, really be able to focus on. And so not very many people can merit that. And so social stratification is necessary from a functionalist standpoint in order to get all that work done, those different types of work done in society. Conflict theorists would look at this also and say, well, those jobs that you just mentioned that are really high paying, that require a whole lot of higher education to do them and a whole lot of skill, well, not everybody has the same life chances for education. And so there might be some folks out there on the bottom rungs of the ladder who would be the best neurosurgeon around, but they'll never have the life chance to do it because they grew up like Lolly's kin kids did in the video that we watched in the most recent time that we were together. And so, so there's some inequality built into the system that a conflict theorist wants to wipe out, whereas a functionalist says it's necessary for society because society is built on inequality. So, so we're going to be talking about a lot of issues, relationships to power in this particular week. However, I'm not advocating for one political position religion or social movement or sociological theoretical perspective over the next. These are just basic issues that you can look at whether you like conflict theory best or functionalism the best for your macro scale point of view. But one of the things we're also going to be really gearing toward between now and the end of the semester is really honing in on our connection between that micro level experience and those macro level social patterns that we inherit at birth or adoption. So we have a lot to do, essentially. We're learning new material, but remember, we are at a stage in the semester where you've got so much material behind you. You are a critical thinker now. You are analyzing things, you are synthesizing information, and that's what you've got to do at the college level. So we're going to be talking about all of these things, but I need you to really focus on those connections. I will be presenting basic info to you, but your brain needs to be working in the background. And if you like functionalism the best, then analyze it with a functionalist perspective. If you like social conflict the best, then analyze it with that perspective. If you like to look at micro scale things and the symbolic interactionism kind of framework, do that, but don't forget you need to apply a macro scale kind of guideline for that the functionalist perspective can give you or the conflict perspective can give you. So remember that you can study microscale things, but never without that educated lens of that social patterning that we're talking about. So symbolic interactionism usually is the hardest one to do well, and forget about postmodernism at this level. That's much more complicated that you can study with future sociology classes that you take at university. So we're going to talk about these ascribed statuses. How do they affect our life chances? How does it create a relationship between us and the power structure in society? What's a dominant group versus a subordinate group? Those are the words we should use instead of majority and minority. When we're talking about issues of power, we should use those words dominant and subordinate rather than majority and minority, because majority, we tend to use that in everyday conversation to mean dominant or controlling. But majority implies that you have the most numbers of people in a population among the majority. And that's not always the folks who make up the dominant group. Sometimes the dominant group is a very few people, a very few in that category of people. So majority is not really a word that we should use in relationship to the power structure in society. We should use dominant instead. And minority, usually people who have subordinate positions to the dominant group, they aren't necessarily few in numbers. Sometimes they have the most in the population numerically, but they have the least power. And so dominant versus subordinate. And there are many ways in which your ascribed status of race, ethnicity, sex, and gender can affect your majority or dominant status versus the subordinate status that we're going to be talking about. And also, issues of institutional discrimination and these kinds of things. Okay, so macro, micro, all of these things are connected this particular week. We've got to get our thinking caps on. And next, we will talk about the difference between race and ethnicity, because that's chapter 9. And then we're also going to jump to chapter 10 in the third video for this week and look at the difference between sex and gender, because you can't use any of these words interchangeably. They mean something different. They are different types of ascribed statuses that affect your position in social stratification. So I'll see you again in another video real soon.